a Mxyzptlk meeting a Mxyzptlk or Mxyzptlk or sorry, I grew up on Super
it's totally
Friends.
fine. And that's why everyone has a different way to say it. Like I grew up on the animated series, so that's
Pickles.
so,
Yeah. Yeah, let's call him mixed pickles.
yeah,
for the rest
yeah,
of
right,
the
we'll
episode.
agree. Mixed pickles, which is what the Impossible
Because when
Man calls
Impossible
him.
Man called him that, yeah, when he called him that, I was dying.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Jmike Folson.
Welcome back to the show, everybody.
Welcome back. We are crossing over with one of our wonderful Discord friends who has been such a great part of the community and is coming on the show to talk about some really fun comics that came out. Today we're joined by Logan Crowley.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It really is really cool to be on here after being such a big fan of the show.
I can't tell you how weird it is to hear that. Like I love meeting people but when they're like, "Oh, I'm a huge fan of the show," as opposed to like I listen to the show because I happen to be your friend. It's such a wonderful change in it, and so I'm blushing a bit, and so it's wonderful having you on. You brought up that there have been a bunch of things published recently that for a long time seemed like impossible dreams, and that includes the DC versus Marvel Omnibus. This bad boy came out recently and has so many good stories going on there, and some of them we have no reason to talk about on this podcast. Like, as much as I love both the X-Men and Teen Titans, and the X-Men Teen Titans crossover is amazing, it's kind of a reach to talk about here.
It's great stuff happening. Case, what are you talking about?
Well, I mean, again, like we could make a case for it, but like it's a bit of a reach. But there is some really good Superman content in here, and so we are going to be mining this omnibuy for some time. And today we're going to talk about one of the stories that I remember really well from the '90s, despite I think never actually owning it. I think I only read it in B. Dalton's at my local mall a ton of times, but at no point ever actually like purchasing this issue. So glad to finally have it, which is today we are talking about the Silver Surfer meets Superman, or I guess just Silver Surfer Superman.
Yeah, it really bothers me that there's not an ampersand or a versus on the cover.
Yeah, there's a slash on the on the table of contents, so it's Silver Surfer / Superman, which is how I'm going to post it in the episode art, because it would drive me crazy just to have Silver Surfer Superman, though that would be a really cool combination of a character.
I mean, yeah, now there's an amalgam. There's an amalgam that we should have gotten. Silver Superman.
Actually, no joke. So I have this whole like headcanon for like what I consider like a weirdly like DC-ified version of the Fantastic Four, where Hyperion is a member, and I had this idea for him having taken on to defeat Dr. Doom, like stealing the Silver Surfer's power, like taking those powers on for a period of time. And so like there is I have the headcanon version that could allow for us to have basically a Silver Surfer Superman.
I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but I think that does happen in this omnibus somewhere. Not wink wink.
Superman does become a Herald of Galactus in the Fantastic Four.
That is true. Yep. That is true. Yeah.
But I want him on the surfboard, or even like a big version of the S Shield that just flies through space.
Yeah. Kind of like the way the Super Soldier shield was the S Shield.
Yes. The amalgam that I always wanted, and I drew this up one time, but I'm not a incredible artist, but I always wanted a Fantastic Four Superman amalgam where it is his powers broken up amongst four people for some reason. I thought that would be such a slam dunk as the first family and the first hero of DC.
Yeah. I could really see that. Which makes me think of two things. One, there is the Legends of Dead Earth story where they have the League of Supermen, which is each member has one power of Superman.
Oh, I haven't
It's
read
a
that.
really cool story. It's like far future Earth colony where the hologram of Superman preserved Jor-El style guides this guy, like this colony world founded on his beliefs, and they have the guardians that protect them are humans genetically modified to have one Kryptonian trait each, and each one of them has because they're just a human with this power, some sort of horrible consequence to it. So like the guy who has heat vision has to like every hour shoot off a blast, otherwise his body like burns up.
Oh, Jesus.
And the guy who's super strong is super strong and like, you know, has to be
Yeah.
like incredibly careful around everything, and like is basically like an invalid when he's not on the clock because he could accidentally destroy anything he touches, so he has to have like handlers do everything for him.
Oh, man.
And like the
That's
invulnerable
rough.
guy is invulnerable in a way he can't feel anything, you know, that kind of like those kind of things. But it's a really fun story with that concept.
Oh, I've never even heard of that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was the Legends of Dead Earth was a really fun set of annuals where they did Elseworlds, but it was like all like future set Elseworlds where like Earth is just a legend that they talk about, and so each book was like discussing the legend of the respective superhero. We are in the 90s, which is the right time period to be discussing things, but we should actually try to like get back to the comic.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
So
I'm a notorious rabbit trailer. You're gonna have to keep me online.
it is okay. I myself as well. We are nerds of a feather here. So but I want to talk about this issue. So Silver Surfer meets the Superman. Before we get into the like, I will do a beat by beat on this one because I think it's worth the sort of breakdown of it all. But one thing I find fascinating is that at this period, like this is like the Triangle era Superman, like it's 90s Superman. It's, you know, the Byrne stuff, you know, post crisis, you know, after his death. No, it has to be after his death. So in terms of his power set, this is probably Superman at his weakest after the Golden Age. You know, this is the toned down version of the 90s. And so it's an interesting story because this is also a period where the Silver Surfer is being touted as being so goddamn powerful.
Oh, yeah.
So it is an inverse of the usual kind of Superman crossover where he's the most powerful person in the room.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really cool about it. And I just I looked up the year. It's 96 in the copyright.
Okay.
Which is also fascinating because Superman should have a mullet in this comic, and he does not. Someone put their foot down, I guess, and said, different universe, I can do the regular haircut. But I kind of miss it, if I'm honest.
You're quite right about that. But I mean, in terms of the actual creative team, we have some really strong people involved. George Perez is the writer on this one, and Ron Lim is the artist. And I goddamn love Ron Lim. And if anyone's going to be doing a Silver Surfer book, like he is the artist to do so.
Absolutely.
At least in this period, I should clarify. Like there have been many definitive Silver Surfer runs, but like 90 Silver Surfer, Ron Lim.
Oh yeah, the three Rons of the 90s, two of which were on Silver Surfer at the time, of Ron Mars, Ron Lim, and Ron Friends. I think the three Rons are all super underrated. And I almost, if I'm gonna do a little bit of heresy because George Perez actually is my favorite comic artist, but I almost would have preferred Mars and Lim on this book because there's a couple of weird continuity things in it with that Perez leaves open. And like I said, I have a wonderful story about meeting George Perez, but I don't know that I like his writing as much as I like his pencils.
I think that is fair. I don't think anyone's like, he's a penciler first. Like he is a great writer when he is struck by inspiration, but we've seen him struggle. Like the New 52 stuff that he was writing, like not his fault. Like editorial wouldn't give him anything to like go on, and he had to like invent a story that had no stakes.
Yeah, but
still, like, you know, we've seen him struggle. It's not like he's an automatic gold every single time versus his pencils, which were always fantastic.
He does. I met him at MegaCon in, I want to say it was 2012, and I had just been accepted to the Savannah College of Art and Design with a scholarship. Well, actually, I got accepted in the line. I got the email while I was waiting to meet George Perez. I ended up not going. That's a whole other story. But when I got to the front of the line, I showed him the email that I'd gotten a scholarship, and I was really excited. And he just immediately, he gave me a big hug. He had tears in his eyes, he held up my hand and shouted it to the whole line. And he was like, "You are looking at one of the next great artists in comics right here." And I didn't have the heart to tell him that it was an acting scholarship. I just let the moment happen. I was like, yeah, thanks.
That's awesome.
Well, you can be a great artist in comics in the sense of performing as a character.
Oh, it's true. Yeah. I think that ship unfortunately has sailed too, but I still got, I'll always treasure the moment just because he hugged me like we were relatives, like nothing held back. And I'm a pretty big guy, like compared to him. So the fact that he was trying his best to get his arms all the way around me and stuff, it was just, I never met it. No other celebrity I've ever met was like George Perez.
Yeah, and that supports everything I've ever heard about him. Like just a fantastic person, such a loss.
Indeed.
So why don't we get into the issue itself? Because I have a lot of things that we're gonna want to talk about in this all, and we can kind of just go beat by beat and sort of see how those things sort of pop up. The opening page sort of goes for what. So the nature of this particular crossover is that they are two separate realities. Like it's Marvel and DC are different multiversal kind of things. I would say that this is the kind of issue that is supposed to be, and this is probably why they were like no mullet, because it's going to tie us to a specific time, attempting to be as divorced from continuity as possible. There's one other Superman specific thing that also like makes this a very specific time, and that is that the Contessa is a major player, but Lex Luthor is not.
Yes. And that I remember her from reading the Superman comics as a kid, but barely.
Yeah.
And I actually wanted to ask, is she psychic? Am I not remembering that? Because when she sees Superman over the camera, Superman thinks to himself, what's the line? Superman thinks to himself, so it's always easy to just pop out of range of her cameras. And then she says to the camera, then it won't be so easy for you to just, as you say, pop.
Right. And I don't think she is, because also why would she bother with the cameras?
Right.
But it's possible that the scene was supposed to be instead of thought bubbles, he was supposed to be just like monologuing.
Oh, maybe.
And she caught it on camera. Or he may have said it at some other time and she caught it, because I'm pretty sure she's not supposed to be psychic. I'm pretty sure she's just supposed to be evil billionaire, wife of Lex Luthor, also head of Cadmus's Splinter group. That what was it called? God, the ones who created Match. I just can't think of their name right now.
Oh, I can't remember either. I thought it was Cadmus.
Right. No, it was a upstart group trying to wean in on Cadmus's parade and steal all their secrets. The Agenda, that was it.
Oh, wow, that's opening a time capsule somewhere in my head.
Agenda.
Yeah.
That's pre Bizarro Match.
Yes. Back when Match was supposed to be the more powerful clone of Superboy. The more powerful and smarter clone. Anyway, so we open with just this very generic Superman. Like it's Metropolis, USA, and Superman's flying over the city. Man, my patrol's doing great. Even those muggers are stopped by cops. It's burn era Superman. Right down to like his interaction with the Contessa is very similar to him sort of evading like specifically like the burn era Lex Luthor, both by way of his speed, but by way of vibrating to make sure that the pictures were blurry all the time. Like it feels like that issue of Superman right after the reboot where like Lex Luthor finds out the secret identity of Superman and then decides that can't be true. Superman can't have a secret identity. Like, why would he hide himself?
Yeah. In a lot of her dialogue feels like this script originally, she and then some stuff with, I can't remember his first name, but Stern, who was the temporary editor for the Daily Planet during this time. A lot of their dialogue feels like at one version of this script, they were Lex and Perry. And then somebody came back and said, no, it has to be this. And with her, they just added some Mario video game-esque Italian euphemisms at the ends of some of her sentences. And she says Mamma Mia at one point. and Superman says "Arrivederci" to her when he flies away.
Yeah. Oh God, I wasn't even thinking about that.
Mamma mia.
Oh God. Anyway, so then we cut over to the Silver Surfer, who is likewise flying, and they do a lot to emphasize very quickly just how goddamn powerful he is. He's like they're like, as he strides light year after light year in mere seconds, you know, they really emphasize the scale of power that is definitely not where Superman is at these days. And I think that's entirely intentional. I mean, like, and we'll see that as the story continues, like that it's just time after time they're just trying to point out like the power cosmic is on the scale that is so different from what we see with Superman at any point. But Silver Surfer flies over this world that is not supposed to exist, and it's a little bit of a mystery for him, so he goes in to investigate. And this world is very weird, and we'll talk about it more as we find out more about like what the specific details are, because it was supposed to be an asteroid, and now it's like this like flaming, like rapidly evolving planet. And then we'll find out that there's even more to it as we continue. But at this point, it's just, here's this weird fireball that just sort of showed up in the middle of the sky.
There's part of me, and we'll get into the, you know, the specifics as we go through it, but there's a part of me that wonders how much of this comic was done Marvel method, because there are some very strange twists and turns with this planet and the nature of it that feel like later on they were maybe not thought through as much, but we got to a certain part in the art and there's a scroll armada, and so they got to say, well, we gotta say something that makes that make sense.
That, you know, that makes a lot of sense. That I had thought about it, but for artists like, you know, I mean, Perez is an artist first, as we've discussed, and has worked with Ron Lim before. And Ron Lim took over for Perez for Infinity Gauntlet, and then did the Infinity Watch stuff, like Infinity War and Infinity Crusade. So like Ron Lim has a track record of working well with the sort of stuff that Perez is working on. Like, and I could imagine them on this wanting to be that kind of collaborative team that would do like, here's the pitch of the page, and then, you know, let the artist go and then like fill in the script afterward. I could see that definitely applying to a lot of this.
I think too that a lot of the power level stuff with the Silver Surfer, I mean, I think part of that too is we're very much in the Infinity Gauntlet era, where that Starlin and Ron Mars corner of the Marvel universe was one of the hottest things they had going. And it's probably, I would say, you tell me if I'm wrong, I think that's the peak of Silver Surfer's popularity as a character, was in this 90s period. People also, too, I think there's a lot of people forget, because he's not very punchy, how powerful the Silver Surfer is. In the original Sal Buscema run with Stan Lee, where his first solo series, when we see his creation, Galactus says that he is giving him a third of his power. And then some of the stuff he does in this book with Metropolis and the area around him is just, I don't think Marvel would let it happen these days. I think in a post power scaling internet, they are much cagier about things of this size than they used to be.
Yeah, I mean, what's terrifying is this is not even the most powerful version of the Silver Surfer.
What do you mean?
Even his final form.
Just that the future timeline version of the Silver Surfer is even crazy more powerful, because he gets the quantum bands from Quasar.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not a huge fan of Donny Cates, but the black skinned Silver Surfer that also has the Infinity Gauntlet in Mjolnir.
Oh shit, yeah.
Wait, what?
There's a lot of
basically the Silver Surfer. His base form is Frieza, and then he has like even more powerful final forms.
Well, and there's so few moments. Dan Slott did a lot with this in his run. There's so few moments where you really, really see the Surfer cut loose on somebody too. You know, he's very powerful, but he is so passive, and he's one of the few characters in comics that will absolutely let the Hulk beat him unconscious instead of having a superhero fight that will blow up a city. And so there's a lot of comics where people go, oh, well, the Surfer might not be that powerful because the Hulk knocked him out. Well, he didn't, he stood there and let the Hulk hit him several times. And then there's other comics where somebody like the Champion or the In-Betweener that can snap his fingers and disintegrate planets pisses the Surfer off. And he goes, hold on a minute, pal. And just floors them.
Yeah. As we'll see as the story goes on. So we start cutting to, we get like this very nice bisected like shot of Superman and the Silver Surfer, like, close up on each half of their face put together to be one head. And then the next page, we've got the Superman side of the story on the top and the Silver side on the bottom. And we have what appears to be Krypton for Superman, which, obviously is a lot of questions for everyone involved. Including us, like what, including those of us assuming, that they were going to be doing crossover stuff. Like, why all of a sudden is Superman on Krypton if they're shouldn't he be on like, like in the Shi'ar Empire or something like that if they were going to like drop Superman into a Marvel thing. And meanwhile, the Silver Surfer crash lands in Metropolis.
Yeah. And not just Krypton, but scary ass John Byrne mushroom dress. Right. Krypton.
Yes, again, this is like very much 90s Superman. So it is that style of like everyone in black bodysuits with then like shawls over them.
And the headpieces.
And I think that these weird dresses are one of the most commonly forgotten about things too, because and ultimately with the twist in this, it ends up this isn't really Krypton,
right?
Spoilers. And so it's not a big deal. But when the cops show up with the armor and the ray guns, I think that should have been a clue to Superman, because if you read World of Krypton, those weird dresses are suits of power armor, many orders of magnitude more powerful than Iron Man. The armor that preceded them on Krypton was like the size of a building. And at different times in the late 80s and early 90s, Superman would fight the power armor that preceded them and was not strong enough to keep up. And then by the end of World of Krypton, these dresses, Jor-El says something about that these are the improvement over them, more powerful than those power suits and sleeker. But that never comes up again. Nobody in one of these dresses ever actually uses any of that, to my knowledge.
And that also wasn't common knowledge, like, because most of the depictions of Krypton, I mean, this was the standard appearance for characters from Krypton for over a decade. And there were many appearances of Jor-El and Lara or other Kryptonian like representations that generally were fairly passive figures. So like seeing them in action wasn't like widely known to everyone. So having them be like, this is the citizenry just kind of running, like isn't going to immediately jump out to the reader. But you are right that if you are really in the know, like this, it's suspect.
You would think Clark would have been like, hey, why is this legion of cross-dressing Iron Men fleeing from anything?
Yeah. Meanwhile, Superman's powers are starting to fade, and he has a weird sort of philosophy on it, which I guess makes sense because the 90s.
I have questions.
Yeah, yes.
I have so many questions. Okay, so he's like, there's entire scene. He's looking around like, okay, this is Krypton. How did I get to Krypton? He's looking up. He's looking around. He looks up at the red sun, and I was like, okay. He's thinking about, okay, I don't have my full like array of powers here. But like a few scenes later, he's like, oh, wait, none of this matters. I can still fight my full strength without any issue. So like, why was he taking an ass kicking here?
Oh, I mean, clearly he was under the that is clearly
the whole red sun fake out. And I was like, wait a second. So was he actually, was it a mental thing?
Yeah, it's a mental thing. And there's a line where he says that his telescopic vision, I believe. Yeah. Which he says, which I shouldn't have right now, is having trouble seeing through this haze. And it's a clunky line because if his powers are draining but not gone, he in theory would still have it. It's just if you go off of like the sort of pre-crisis scenario of like as soon as he's in the red sun space, he loses all of his powers. That's where it's like kind of weird. So that bit's just a little bit clunky there. When he realizes that he's not on Krypton, that's when all of his full powers come back.
The mental block.
I love the moment in here where he says, and this just highlights the Byrne era Superman being a man from Kansas first, and everything else coming later in life. I love when he's trying to run from these cops, and he goes, "Thankfully, Kryptonians can't fly." And then he jumps and falls directly onto his face and goes, "Now that was smart. I'm a Kryptonian." Like, oh yeah, I'm from Krypton
Wait
too.
a second.
Yeah, I that's a good comedic moment there, as he's trying to run from these all. And then we get the actual first matchup, and this is the one that I'm so excited about, but at the same time, it's a fake out, so it's like hard to be quite as enthused. But we get Clert the Super Skrull, apparently.
With a very Joel Schumacher-esque entrance, where we see aspects of his body, including his six-pack, in extreme close-up before revealing his whole self.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm not gonna lie. When I saw that reveal, I was like, "Wait, are we gonna fight Mongol?" Because it looks like Mongol right there, and I was like, "Oh wait, okay, this might be pretty cool." And I was like, "Oh, it's a fake out." Curse you!
I wish I wondered. It's funny you mentioned that, because I had the same thought rereading this before I talked to you guys about it. Because when Super Skrull shows up on this end, I thought, and Silver Surfer fights Mongol.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be amazing. And then not only is this not the Super Skrull, but they don't really do anything like that on the Silver Surfer.
Right. The ultimate plot is weird when it gets revealed. But I will say, Clert as a matchup against Superman is a fantastic choice. Like, I think that is such a great matchup that I am so sad we've never really seen. Spoilers for this whole story. It's all a fake out plot.
Oh my gosh, spoilers!
Yeah, I do. If anybody's made it this far in this and hasn't had this spoiled for them before, I do want to give a disclaimer that probably should have come earlier. If you buy the original printing of this, I don't know what it looks like in the omnibus, but I have the original issues. If you've never read this before, be very careful when you read it not to look at the back, because there is a secret villain reveal in this, and for what some that is integral to the plot that you not know what the twist is. And for some reason I will never understand, the secret villains are printed on the back of the book.
Goddamn, that is for real.
Like if you just, listeners, if you're worried about spoilers, I'm going to spoil it in 5, 4, 3, 2. It's just a big Impossible Man and Mxyzptlk face, just right there. And I don't know. Surely Ron Lim did this cover. I don't know why this was done this way.
I mean, like, they reveal it pretty fast, so I guess there's a sense of like, well, it never really was supposed to be that big of a fake out. But at this point, because like also like Clert doesn't talk like Clert. Like he has a very like he has this like cartoonish villain kind of affect to him.
Oh yeah.
So I think it's supposed to be pretty clear that something is weird going on here.
I would almost describe it as broy. At one point he says this is going to be fun fighting Superman.
Yeah, there's a very big like wrestler energy to it all. It's like so says the Super Skrull. Brother.
Oh man, Hulk Hogan as the Super Skrull. There's 90s casting that we could have gotten. That could have gone right into the Roger Corman one.
Anyway, so then we cut back to the Silver Surfer, who we haven't actually really seen that much of at this point. And his powers are going crazy in what appears to be Metropolis. And by going crazy, I mean, like, he's accidentally every energy blast he does seems to be causing just more destruction. And he has to like really rein in his power because everything is just going crazy.
And I don't know that that's ever really answered why that's happening.
I mean, the meta answer is that it's Mr. Mxyzptlk, but
Mixed pickles.
Yes.
Mixed pickles. I love that.
I was thinking more along. This is like an illusion. Like he's not actually doing too much damage, but like him freaking out is making it worse because he can't tell which is real and which is fake, and that's because Mixie is messing with his mind.
Well, this seems to be, they're ultimately going to find out that Mxyzptlk has bottled Metropolis a la Candor. This seems, in that instance, to be real because they have to put Metropolis back.
Yeah.
So I think Superman's end is an illusion, but I think every bus you see Silver Surfer vaporize is someone's livelihood. I think this all kind of stays.
So I haven't paid that car off yet.
And thus we get more of the Superman cast in here because we're actually like the Superman cast. Again, in terms of like nailing down a specific period, the Superman side is the one where like here's very strict continuity versus the Silver Surfer side, which could really be plucked from any point in any Silver Surfer run. He just like, and part of that is the Silver Surfer doesn't really have the same like iconic supporting cast to pull from. So we see like the Daily Planet office, as you pointed out. Perry White is nowhere to be found. It's Stern. We cut to the Contessa, and then we see the Contessa's guard show up. And again, like, this is clearly just supposed to be Lex Luthor, right? Like, they just didn't, it was just like, oh, well, we can't use Lex Luthor, so we're going to just slightly change it all.
Yeah, and very slightly indeed, because maybe I'm not remembering it, but I don't remember the Contessa ever being this much of a megalomaniac. And it seemed, from what I remember, during her time at the head of LexCorp, she was much more sympathetic to Superman in a lot of ways.
And subtler.
Right, yeah. And didn't shout as many Italian
right
catchphrases by half.
So the server flees, and when he flees, he apparently hits what is at first you're led to believe is a force field, and then it literally breaks when he hits it, and we cut away. But they did this issue does a really good job of pulling on a lot of like Silver Age Superman references that they weren't really allowed to do at the time, and so it's a Bottled City of Candor type situation here, except it's Metropolis.
Yeah.
So we cut back to theoretically a drained power or like a depowered Superman fighting Super Skrull. And we get a really good use of the Super Skrull power set. Like Super Skrull is one of those characters that I actually would put as like dream power sets to have. Like Superman's obviously in that's like probably a step above in that category, but Super Skrull's like really cool. Like he's a shapeshifter. He can stretch and reconfigure himself in ways beyond just like basic appearance changing. Super strong, has high durability, and then the combined powers of the Human Torch and the Invisible Woman, and those are so cool. And the emphasis on Super Skrull using the invisible force fields to prevent Superman from getting a good hit does such a good job for setting up why this is a lopsided fight when it's already Superman being depowered to stack the deck against him.
And this is so incredibly drawn by Ron Lim. I mean, these pages they're fighting in a circle of fire. The force of Superman punching this invisible force field. There's not a lot of artists that can do kinetic action the way that Ron Lim can. It really feels like all of these punches, you're getting the energy off of every time one lands.
Right, but we also are getting the weird characterization of Super Skrull. And so the dialogue is again tipping off that like there's something weird here. Like Super Skrull doesn't talk about getting bored that way in a fight the same way. Like or if he did, it would be more of a cocky Dragon Ball Z villain style, like getting bored in a fight kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
But when he allows Superman to get an actual hit on him and he bounces him off using Reed Richards' powers, Superman flies up against a structure that starts to topple over and almost falls on some civilians. And the Super Skrull screams out that this isn't part of the game, revealing that this is all a game. And he stretches out to save them all, claiming that this is better for having better slaves for the Empire. But then Superman looks at the Kryptonians again, and for just a moment, they're not Kryptonians.
Yeah, they seem to be the yep, nope.
Yes.
From the Muppets.
Yep.
and then quickly snap back. I love that this is highlighting the differences too between the Impossible Man. Always clearly had one foot in the Mxyzptlk character archetype, but I like that this moment and several others in this issue highlight that though they're similar trickster entities with very similar abilities, there's always been a very different morality between the two. And it's seen really well when he goes to save the spaghetti-headed aliens.
Yeah, there's like a Batmite-ish quality to him. It's just a little bit more noble than the Mxyzptlk type. But we get this wonderful splash page of Superman realizing that he's not on Krypton and punching the Super Skrull as hard as he can while shouting "Game over, imp," which, if you're a Superman fan, you should have figured out that he thinks that it's Mr. Mxyzptlk. And that's a logical thing to come to, especially if you've seen the back cover where they're
yeah.
Meanwhile, we cut back over to the Silver Surfer, who has emerged, and we see that, yes, it is a Bottled City of Candor style situation, but for Metropolis. And
that's no move.
With him peering into the city, he seems even more terrifying and like the person who did this to Metropolis. And so the citizenry is like entirely terrified of the Silver Surfer, even more so.
How did he get back to normal size, though? They never really explained that. He just popped out the city and was like, ta-da.
Yeah, I think it's like the trick cans of snakes from like the party stores, where if you open the top, you just pop out full size.
Yeah, they don't explain it.
They say it's the power cosmic.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly within his power to, as we will see, to be back at normal size. But he seems to come back to full size just by emerging, which leads me to think that it's part of the magic of what Mxyzptlk is doing.
It's the power cosmic.
Could be both.
Oh, well, with some of the stuff that he does in this book, vis-a-vis size changing later, he may very well have just subconsciously been like, I need to be bigger than this. I don't fit in this room. That's always the Kirby New Gods thing, right? Is the mother box looks into the universe ahead of them and decides how tall they need to be based on where they're going.
Right.
That's maybe Power Cosmic does something similar.
Yeah, I mean,
like, you're going to look silly if you're small in this room, right, up to 6'2".
Yeah, or just as soon as he wasn't being suppressed in size, the Power Cosmic caused him to revert. But if someone else had been freed of it, like, they wouldn't have the ability to catch up, something to that effect. Either way, he realizes that he's in the Fortress of Solitude and immediately starts getting attacked by things, which includes a version of the giant key from the Silver Age, which again is just like fun to have. Again, a sign of the times where this is an anomaly as opposed to being like a recognized part of Superman lore that's back in vogue.
I actually learned that. I learned the actual origin of these keys from y'all's podcast.
Yeah.
I had never known about the Arctic signs.
I was blown away when I found out those are real.
Yeah, and it doesn't appear that George knows either, because when the Silver Surfer sees it, he goes, a gigantic key, as if that looks like a key.
A giant arrow. No, actually, it's more of a key. And like, there's nothing that's like key, like aside from like a few teeth on the bottom.
This page also has, as he goes through and he starts to, this fortress is attacking him. The fortress is speaking to him like an alarm. Yeah. And it starts out very formal, but then it starts to tease him. And one of my favorite pages is when it says, Norrin Rad, your destruction is an absolute certainty. And he says, wrong, I have traveled the cosmos long enough to know that there is no such thing as an absolute certainty. And the fortress says back, oh, really? You're absolutely certain about that? A fortress with a sense of humor?
Yeah. One thing I note about the fortress is that it seems to be a combination of the fortress and also of the Batcave, because there are there's a dinosaur robot that attacks.
Yeah.
And also there's a giant coin. And look, the giant coin, I think actually started Superman and then went Batman. I don't remember exactly. I fully believe that Superman has all this shit in his fortress on top of that.
Oh yeah. Well, the 50s versions of the fortress and the Batcave are incredibly similar. I guess they just weren't worried about
Right.
it. I do think that Superman's giant coin is supposed to be a dime, if I remember correctly, and Batman's is only a penny, which you'd think would be reversed based on their incomes. but in the 50s, they were, with both of them, there was just this thought of like, what would a little boy have in his secret lair if he could have anything? And it was loose change he found on the sidewalk and dinosaurs.
Right. just giant versions of them. Just
right.
So we cut back over to the Super Skrull wailing on Superman, but Superman now just no selling it.
So was he just faking the entire time?
Well, again, he thought he was on Krypton, and it was experiencing it as if he was, but was curious about like why his powers weren't fading the way they should have been. So, again, they're trying to explain it.
Mental blocks.
It's almost like a psychosomatic
exactly
kind of thing.
Meanwhile, Superman is convinced that this is Mr. Mxyzptlk, and so he keeps on calling him Imp, and eventually says Mxyzptlk to him, and that is where it's like, "Hi, you actually said it," and it's revealed to be the Impossible Man. So Jmike,
not gonna lie, I never heard of that before.
Yeah, I was about to get it back.
I was like, not gonna lie, I'd never heard of it before.
So the Impossible Man is a long-standing cosmic-ish kind of villain. He's the Imp archetype, but for Marvel. So he first appeared in the Fantastic Four and is explicitly an alien from a world where there's just so many threats that the population developed the ability to evolve immediately to respond to any kind of threat instantly, and as a result are shapeshifters on the highest level, except they can't change their colors. So they can teleport around, and they can turn into literally anything in very powerful versions of those things. It's not like a Skrull situation where they can look like a thing, but not necessarily have the properties of the thing that they transform into. Like, he fully can transform into whatever. And as a being who can't die and is pretty able to just wander around, he got bored and wandered around and found Earth, and Earth has a lot of playmates, and then like found the greater Marvel cosmic universe, and likewise has a bunch of playmates, and usually just sort of like literally pops in and causes trouble until either he gets bored or the people around him figure out. Like, famously, the issue of Fantastic Four, the way they beat him was they just ignored him, and he got so frustrated that he teleports away.
You know what is interesting about him to me is, and this is another Byrneism from his time on both books. I know he did it in his run on Superman, and I believe he also did it in his run on the Fantastic Four. There are scenes where you see Mxyzptlk step over into another universe and turn into the Impossible Man, and then also you see the Impossible Man step over and turn into Mxyzptlk, I think, in his Fantastic Four run.
Was that burnt? Because it's in Crisis of the Crimson Kryptonite is where we see the Mxyzptlk going over and turning into the Impossible Man, and so that is actually after Byrne left. But and the reason I remember specifically which arc that was in is because that's the reason why he sends the Crimson Kryptonite, because he's too busy harassing the Fantastic Four.
Right. I thought he did that as well in his first appearance in the Byrne stuff, but it's been a while since I read that. I probably have that misremembered.
It's entirely possible that they did it twice, but I just remember that in Crisis of the Crimson Kryptonite, they do the Impossible Man getting teased off by the Fantastic Four sequence, or not teased off, but like ignored off by the Fantastic Four sequence at the very end of that arc.
It does make me wonder, though, is what I mean, obviously the short answer is that as far as George Perez and Ron Lim were concerned, they were two different characters. They didn't realize that. But on a deeper level, it makes me wonder if this is a Mxyzptlk meeting a Mxyzptlk or Mxyzptlk, or sorry, I grew up on
it's totally fine. And that's why everyone has a different way to say it. Like, I grew up on the animated series, so that's yeah.
Yeah, let's call him Mixed Pickles.
Yeah,
for the rest
right, we'll agree. Mixed Pickles, which is what the Impossible Man calls him.
Man called him that. Yeah, when he called him that, I was dying. But I wonder, because there's been some other stuff with Mixed Pickles' timeline at other times in comics where it's unclear where you're meeting him. I almost wonder if Mixed Pickles doesn't realize the Impossible Man is him from a future timeline, and so this is a double prank. Like, he's pranking himself and he's pranking. Is an interesting notion there about what's going on with that.
Yeah, I mean, so they are archetypally the same. So like, however, yeah, I mean, it's a fifth dimensional being, so there is the scenario of like, yeah, it from our perspective, they could be two different points of different times. There could be this whole like they're the same being, just being perceived differently, and they perceive themselves differently, even though they are in fact the same being. Element, if we want to get into weird divinity kind of structure that sort of plays into it, because like Grant Morrison, for example, like presents that like genies are fifth dimensional beings, so
Right.
we could get into some weird scenarios there, and like the way that they treated the Johnny Thunder's Thunderbolt like fused with another one, because it was like seen as like, oh, their colors blending together, and that allowed for two to become one. So who's to say one can't become two, or one can't be two in the first place?
Oh, that's a good point. I definitely subscribe to the in the Tomasi Gleason run. They had the issue where they revealed that there's only one Mxyzptlk in all of comicdom, and that every time you see him in an animated series, in a live action show, as Howie Mandel, whatever, it's the same one at different points in his timeline, messing with Superman from all over the multiverse.
You know, My Adventures with Superman would support that to a degree.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. 'Cause when he picks up the bowler's hat, and it until he picks it up, it doesn't change. It initially looks like the bowler's hat, but when he touches it, it switches to the more kind of DBZ inspired art style of the show. I love that. And then it also fixes the only thing I don't like about that Mxyzptlk is they say he's a god of chaos instead of a fifth dimensional imp. That would fix that for me, because I would just say he's lying.
Yeah. Well, and also you could describe one as such without necessarily being invalid, you know, like a fifth dimensional being perceived as a god, and obviously he's a creature of chaos. It works well enough. I mean,
that also, I like in my head canon to think that the New 52 Mxyzptlk from the Grant Morrison action run is the first Mxyzptlk in the timeline that we've ever had. He's the oldest. And then I like to think that For the Man Who Has Everything
is the finale of him. Yeah.
The last one, you know. And if that's the case, I wonder if the Impossible Man isn't closer to that end than the front end, because at some point before he decides he's going to kill people for 2,000 years, like he does in Whatever Happened to the Man. I wonder if at some point before that he was like, I'm going to go to Marvel and try messing with these Fantastic Four folks for a while. Maybe I'm just getting bored because I'm getting bored with Soups. And then whenever that wears out, he goes, well, now I'll try killing, I guess.
Here I go killing again.
Yeah, I mean, if I were, this is such headcanon that we're getting into on this one. Like, if I were to like push it out there, sure. I would probably put Impossible Man as the earlier timeline version of him, and just say that they probably also have bad memory for like considering how long lived they are and how little they care about things.
Oh, that would be amazing if Mxyzptlk doesn't remember that he's Impossible Man.
because the Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow version says that he started off being good and then worked his way to being a trickster and then worked his way to being evil. And like, I would put Impossible Man as more on the good end of the spectrum. Like, I could see him as an early dabbler in being a trickster, and it's entirely possible. It's like Doctor Who. Like, he could have had different looks and be different incarnations of themselves and have completely weird, fucked up memories in this whole period, and just not really process that it's the same person.
You're just lore hopping today.
A bit, yeah.
I think you're right about it. And that's actually the reason why I think the Grant Morrison one is the earliest one, because in that, when he gets the backstory from Mxyzptlk in New 52, he says the version of Mxyzptlk that she describes is this friendly court jester who just helps everyone in the kingdom. And that's him talking in Whatever Happened about he was good for 2,000 years. That's why I think that version is first. So I guess Impossible Man could slot in right after that. But
Yeah,
back to this comic. I apologize.
So we see a little bit more of the fortress fight with the Surfer, but at this point we've already started to process like, oh, it's something's going on between Mr. Mxyzptlk and the Impossible Man. Anyway, so the Impossible Man is bouncing around, gleeful that he is the one who like convinced Superman to be that. He won the prank. He pretended to be Mr. Mxyzptlk sufficiently. And he explains the encounter between himself and Mxyzptlk in the sort of like pop-up space that they have, which I thought was a really fun convention for how they would like both meet up with each other. It would have been more fun if they established that it was the fifth dimension specifically that he was in.
Well, and you know, with how limited Impossible Man's powers are, it may very well be, and he doesn't know. You know, we're having this narrated from his point of view, so he may have always thought of it as this in between space. But if you had Mixie's perspective, maybe he realizes that it is the fifth dimension,
right? And so they meet each other and establish that they are similar kinds of playful imps, and decide to do a swap challenge with each other with the basic premise of being like, well, they're not going to meet each other and we're going to convince them that they are encountering their usual foe, which the Impossible Man is really into. Meanwhile, Mr. Mxyzptlk seems to not give a shit about that at all. Like, I don't think he does anything at all to appear to be the Impossible Man in any of this all.
Nope.
This is definitely a more cantankerous version of Mixie than you see sometimes. He's not he doesn't even pretend to be the fortress for very long. You know, he immediately starts ribbing the Silver Surfer back.
Yeah, so we see so Superman wants the Impossible Man to resolve this whole situation. We see that there is a Skrull armada now attacking the world, and I think this is where we're saying that like probably that Ron Lim just like drew that, and then they were like, oh, but we already said that this isn't real Skrulls anymore.
Yeah, that is the part that stretches my believability the most. Is Impossible Man says, I'm a method actor, so I ratted out this whole planet of people to the Skrulls because I was pretending to be the Super Skrull so well. Just a few pages after he panicked because a brick was going to fall on one of these people, he has called a fascist intergalactic fleet to sick on them.
Yeah.
But whatever, it's comics. Impossible Man doesn't have to make the decision.
And that is a character who you could believe could see both as not in opposition to each other.
He may very well have been thinking, well, this will be fine because Superman's here.
And poop.
But anyway, so he pops over to the Daily Planet and sees that there is danger happening. So he's upset about the whole situation. Then he pops into, like, out of the Daily Planet into the fortress where the Silver Surfer sees him and then immediately jumps to the assumption that he's involved, which is true. But obviously it's like outside of the power realm that the Impossible Man has. So he can't clearly be the person who is the perpetrator for it all.
And then immediately blasts the Impossible Man into like action figure pieces. Yep. Which is one of my favorite panels.
Wait, it kind of made me think of the Alien in Men in Black, where they just are allowed to like keep shooting him, just like, like, don't you know how much that stings? So I just start blasting them.
I also like that the Impossible Man shifts his fists into boxing gloves when he gets mad at Mxyzptlk. Yeah. Just a little, it's a small thing, but it made me so happy.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have the Impossible Man in on a page of a comic if you're not doing some kind of like prop thing with him. Even on the page before where he's like just goofing around with Superman, like they do this like over the top cartoony style face to him that is like incongruous to the world because you're allowed to do that with the characters. Anyway, Mxyzptlk reveals that he is actually like lying, that the rules the rules that the Impossible Man thought were the rules were not the actual rules. So the Impossible Man's pretty pissed at them, and this begins a sequence of just Marvel and DC just fighting. Like,
oh yeah, it immediately turns into every comic message board from the early 2000s of just what if this character fought this character.
You know,
and if I'm not mistaken, this is the only time, despite it how classic a versus it is. This is the only time we've ever seen the Hulk and Doomsday share a page officially.
An actual official page, yes.
A big orange Doomsday.
Which is, like, I appreciate that they did this color scheme thing with Mxyzptlk just to, like, keep it consistent. Like, that felt fun. It made me think of Mad Jim Jaspers versus the Fury from Captain Britain, like, where reality itself is being bent around while a thing that can, like, break through reality is, like, fighting it. Like, this sort of, like, the chaos fight of shapeshifters fighting each other is so much fun, is I guess what I'm getting at.
Oh, yeah. Well, and some of these too, like, some of them are seem kind of obvious, but one of these panels is Thanos punching Plastic Man, which is I would love for somebody like a Joe Kelly to do that comic of just Thanos having to deal with Plastic Man for a day. They're just stuck somewhere together.
Yeah, like Thanos like keeps trying, but like Plastic Man is like immune to death, and like Thanos is like, "This is why you were beloved by my beloved."
It did take me a second because in one of these panels, it's Cyclops versus the Atom.
Yeah, but it's like the '90s Atom where he's like a teenager.
Yeah,
with the fishing vest. Yeah, like I don't. It took me a second to realize what was going on there.
Yeah, there's also some casual misogyny from the Impossible Man, where when it's Wolverine versus Wonder Woman, where it's like a female can't match up against Wolverine.
Yeah,
and like that, I'm like, I don't think the Impossible Man sees gender. Like that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but like I said earlier, Impossible Man doesn't strike me as a guy who makes well thought out decisions.
This is true.
And not for nothing, he loses that fight. So that might be, he immediately has to turn into Giant Man or Goliath, I think, to try to get out of that situation because he's getting clobbered.
We get Aquaman versus Namor.
Can you guys tell who is the fishnetted sleeve with the spike bracelet? That was the only one in the book I couldn't figure out who that was supposed to be.
Is it Gamora?
Oh, I'll bet you're right. I'll bet it's 90s Gamora.
Like she had that fishnet costume design. I don't remember what her bracelets looked like, but now you got me wondering.
that seems like a very Ron Lim pull. So I think you might have that. The two panels of, if I could only have one of these fights, well, I'd probably pick Hulk versus Doomsday just because of how much that's been talked about. But if I could only have one just for me, the two panels that are the Thing versus Lobo, that would be an amazing comic to have stretched out to 24 pages.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But it concludes with, well, the Impossible Man turning into Galactus, trying to eat Mxyzptlk, and it not working.
Try to eat Lobo.
But the Impossible Man then turns into a version of Superman, and it gets into this whole, like, they're trying to trick Mxyzptlk into violating the terms of the rules that they had actually set out. Sorry, I'm looking at pictures of Gamora still.
The mystery will be solved.
The problem is she has so much artwork that's like post the 90s costume. I gotta find one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All the space characters. There's like a before the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, BC, and then an Anno Domini of after the Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Yeah.
All of their designs just changed completely. Peter Quill went from being a staunch military man to never holding down a job again for the rest of his canon with no real in comics acknowledgement of why. And Gamora is one of those where she went from being a character who was, despite being on the side of the angels, basically a villain, to now when she shows up in comics, she's a much more relatable, respectable kind of lady. And so she doesn't wear fishnets and spikes anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I always thought that Nebula in the movies was closer to the actual comics Gamora.
Yes, 100%.
Anyway, so through a complicated series of mad exchanges, ultimately they get to a point where Superman and the Silver Surfer are in the same room together, which technically finishes the deal that Mxyzptlk had set forth. And so they are, in theory, allowed to go back. They don't trust him, however, to revert Metropolis to full size. So Silver Surfer says, like, well, fuck it, I'll do it. And Superman's like, what do you mean?
Yeah, that is one of those moments where Superman's Superman has a lot of superpowers at his disposal, but unless he can figure out how to punch the city bigger, this is outside of his wheelhouse.
Yeah, like even the Silver Age Superman couldn't restore a city to full size. Like,
No.
and Silver Surfer can just casually do it.
No, which I actually love that. This may be the only superhero crossover ever where Superman is on the back foot like this.
Yeah.
The scene where his eye is looking down into Krypton and he says, "Great Scott," and I guess you can, just sort of. I love it. I don't know if there's any other character in comics who could put Clark in that position.
Yeah, I mean, really, especially like any other hero. Like villains are allowed to be that powerful, so that like they can be, magical creatures like Mr. Mxyzptlk, like Mr. Mixed Pickles.
Mixed Pickles.
But to have a protagonist who is that powerful, I mean, this is like some Dr. Manhattan level, just breaking reality kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't even know. I think there's a very good chance that even Manhattan, even if he does have the power to do this, I think there's a good chance he'd get here and be like, I'm not supposed to.
Yeah.
But the Silver Surfer can just, I like it better that way.
Yep. So
like
they go down after restoring Metropolis, they go in there and they're all like, "Yay, Superman!" and also kill the alien. Because the tide has really turned on Silver Surfer very quickly. But Superman promises that he'll, set the record straight and that they really appreciate meeting each other.
I will scold them appropriately, I promise.
Burn era Superman.
We're going to have a very serious talk about this when we get home, Young City.
Meanwhile, the Silver Surfer goes back to this planet and is so scary that the Skrulls run off immediately. As they establish, the Silver Surfer has a bad reputation wherever he goes, even though he is innately so noble. But he is a hero to these aliens, and they are really appreciative of all that. And so Superman and the Surfer say, like, this is really cool meeting you. Like, it's interesting to see a being as powerful as you who has, this difference of like their setting and surroundings, but still have to deal with fucking annoying imps.
Yeah.
And so they part ways, and then the Impossible Man and Mr. Mxyzptlk just argue off camera.
Hand taser.
Yeah, I love that. And that's also not one of Impossible Man's powers. So at some point in this comic, he had to go buy that. Or steal it. But
yeah. But and then the Silver Surfer flies off, and they establish that their memories are going to fade. So this is a crossover that's allowed to be in canon, even if they have other crossovers that contradict it. The idea is that the story happened, but no one involved remembers it anymore, or at least neither Superman or the Silver Surfer remember it, which makes that whole, like, the fact that Silver Surfer is hated by Metropolis, like, sting even less. It doesn't feel like everywhere he goes, people hate him kind of pariah if the entire city is just going to forget he existed immediately afterward. This time, yeah.
Well, and I wonder how much this, because I don't remember much. There's some of the pariah stuff in the very early Stan Lee, Sal Buscema stuff, but then that really goes away for the Surfer until you get into the Dan Slott, Michael Allred run with the Dawn Greenwood character.
Mm-hmm.
And there is an issue, or it might even be a couple of issues, where they are going around and she starts to learn what his reputation is out in the galaxies where people only associate him with the coming of Galactus. And that series really mines a lot out of that I wonder how much of that kind of was pulled from here.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because this is the point in Surfer lore where he's about as far away from being the Herald of Galactus as he ever will be, because he gets reestablished as the Herald after Annihilation, which is not right after this, but only a few years later. And so, it's a scenario where he could be as, or rather, when he showed up in comics, he was as much a hero as he could possibly be, despite still having the reputation of being the former Herald of Galactus. But getting into the Dan Slott run and stuff where it's been reestablished, they got a chance to re-up that stake that had been so important to his initial concept, that pariah nature.
And that is one thing, and obviously you can't blame I can't blame the writers for this because it's just timeline. But I really would have loved to have seen that era of Silver Surfer crossover with Superman, because that is the one era with Don Greenwood, he really has a supporting cast that could have come with him, and you could have seen them mixing with Superman's supporting cast and vice versa. I think that, obviously, again, that this is not the writer's fault. It didn't exist at the time that they did this, but that would have been so interesting, I think, to see Dawn interacting with the Impossible Man and Mxyzptlk and everything going on with there.
Yeah, just to have something like, because the Silver Surfer side of the story feels so consequenceless, like he's in this weird surreal version of the Fortress of Solitude. Like, meanwhile, I mean, sure, there's like the what could happen to Metropolis, but like no one thought the Metropolis was going to get destroyed in this issue, and
Maybe.
like it's just he's in a madhouse. I don't know what. One thing I found interesting is that the Impossible Man side of the plan, I buy that he could pretend to be Super Skrull. I buy that he could get Skrulls to come in method acting style. The whole transforming everything into Krypton, I don't even understand why they did it, besides trying to like get the red sun so he thinks he's weaker part of it, in which case just go to a red sun.
Well, there is a line in here about that Mxyzptlk had to loan him some power.
Right. Like they even just to have him have the orange part of the thing arm, for example, he had to like do that. So how much power was he loaning for this whole situation to work? Like for the translation magics and for all of the, the illusion components of it? Like, why even bother?
Yeah. Well, like I said, when I really enjoy this comic, but I definitely think that George is much better at his pencil than at his typewriter.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of little stuff like that if you think about it too hard, it will make your head hurt.
Yeah, but aside from that, I do think this is a fun issue. I like this a lot. I think it's fun seeing this crossover. And like we keep saying, like, when is Superman on the back foot? Never. Like, this is like a rare moment for it.
I'll tell you, the big takeaway that I had from this is I really hate that Ron Lim never got an extended Superman run.
Yeah.
Because some of this art and some of the way that he draws his powers is so gorgeous. I would have loved to have seen this, somewhere in the Triangle era, 20, 30 issues of something with him drawing Superman. Could have really been something.
Yeah. Yeah. He's such a gorgeous artist. Can you imagine him doing Superman Blue?
Oh, that would have been amazing.
Yeah. Cause he's so good with like space stuff, like really make it a cosmic looking Superman.
I have such a weird relationship with that because Superman Blues 98. So I was reading comics, but I was 5 or 6 and I hated it. I was just enough set in my ways at the time that when I saw like the action figure on the shelf and the posters in the comic shop my dad worked at, I was like, this is the dumbest. That's not Superman. That's Electro. Only to then jump forward 25 years. And I have so many Superman Blue action figures, and I've got the trade, and I have this nostalgia for this thing that at the time I hated. It's surreal.
Yeah. I personally would love for it to be a powered up state for Superman, just in perpetuity. Like,
well, I thought for a moment this is way off in the weeds, and I apologize.
It's okay. We do that.
I thought for a moment after Lazarus Planet, they were going to give John the Superman Blue powers and leave Clark with the regular powers. And I thought that was a great idea for differentiating how many 20 to 30-year-old dark-haired Kryptonian powered dudes we have flying around Metropolis right now.
For real. So that Connor and John and Clark could have different shticks.
Yeah. Oh, and Kong Keenan and Mon-El right now.
Totally.
And that's not even getting into the girls.
Like
yeah. Well, I could rant for several hours about different missteps that have been done with John Kent, but it would not be new ground and it would not be on topic. No. So I'm gonna stop myself.
Jmike, final thoughts on Superman Silver Surfer?
Mxyzptlk,
yes.
It was a fun ride. Like I enjoy seeing a lot of the Elseworld stuff, especially when we get more of Mxyzptlk, which doesn't get used very often. Like, I like the new iteration they have in the new Superman cartoon. Cool to see different versions of him. Also cool to see, like you guys said earlier, Superman come up against someone he doesn't really come up against who dwarfs him in power, which honestly never really happens in DC unless it's like Darkseid or the Anti-Monitor or something like that. So,
yeah, again, villains are allowed to be, but it's like wild when it's
Yeah.
like another hero.
Yeah, it's just a fun little story. It's a fun little well encapsulated story.
I think it's interesting that they didn't fight at all in this. So many other superhero crossovers feel obligated to do that. And actually, I've been accused by my friends of being a guy who feels like Superman could beat up anybody. And I think, in fairness, there are people who I think would beat Superman, and the Silver Surfer is one of them. If he wanted to, but they don't take that opportunity at all. Also, interestingly, in this one and one of the other ones that we're going to talk about eventually, Superman does not have top billing in either one.
That's true. Yeah, it's Silver Surfer Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Incredible Hulk crossover is also Incredible Hulk Superman, and I think that's very interesting. I wonder if that was a decision of, well, Superman doesn't need it, so put him second, or if that is sort of a telltale behind the scenes of where the priorities of the writers were. Because at this time, George Perez and Ron Lim were both Marvel guys.
I have to guess it's probably actually a publishing situation, like the way that the Amalgam books, like half of the books were published by DC and half were published by Marvel. Like I have to imagine that like who technically was the publisher of the crossover was a factor in terms of like whose billing comes first in it, is my guess.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And so I'm going to guess that both of these are ones that were specifically Marvel published and DC gave the rights scenario, and there are probably other ones in here where it's the reverse.
Gotcha. Either way, though, I'm just glad that this comic exists at all. These are two of my favorite characters.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I do. We haven't talked enough about just like how beautiful Ron Lim's art is in this. It is a really pretty book. Like absolutely, if you listen to this episode and you're like, this sounds like a silly plot, that's fine. Check it out still. It looks really good. Like there's some like really cool shots in here, especially like all the DC versus Marvel stuff where we get to see matchups, like Cyclops versus the Atom, like
yeah,
stuff you just
Cyclops versus Batman is on. We didn't mention that.
Yeah, and a Batman who looks like the Batman of Zur in R.
Oh yeah, because he's orange. I didn't think about that. But just you want to talk about one of the '90s showdowns of all time: Jim Lee strap-chested Cyclops versus the Norm Brayfogle looking but orange Batman. Yeah. It was the top of the sales charts at each other's throats on the page.
So fantastic looking book, totally worth checking out. If like I would say like first of all, pick up the DC versus Marvel Omnibus if you are able to do so. Like it is worth it, and it is unlikely that we are going to see it again.
Oh yeah,
so it's worth it there. And then when you're flipping through, it's a good issue to check out. It's a really fun story, even if not everything makes sense. It's fine. It's a Mr. Mxyzptlk and Impossible Man plot. It's not supposed to make sense.
Oh yeah, no. I think that when you're actually looking at it and you're really getting, like I said, the kinetic quality of the art was something that was so impressive to me. It's because I think that's a skill that Jerry Siegel had of being able to put motion on the page that not every comic artist can do. I love Alex Ross. Don't get me wrong. He's an incredible artist, but his punches always feel posed and not thrown. Mm-hmm. The punches in this book, the energy in this book, it's impossible not to feel like it's moving as you're looking at it. And I think that while there is all those plot nitpicks, that melts away when you're looking at it.
Yeah, I had really warm feelings coming back into this issue, and like they were justified. So definitely worth checking out. And even like like you said, plot nitpicks. It's just nitpicks. It's a fun issue.
Oh yeah. Well, to quote the Contessa, it's a spicy meatball.
Mamma mia.
So Logan, thank you again for coming on. Thank you for bringing this issue. Where can people find you and follow you?
Well, the easiest place to follow me for sure is my comedy, my very currently underused comedy Instagram is at Token Hillbilly. I think my wife and I are about to try to start a comic book podcast. We've got all the names secured. We just have to actually get going on it. We're thinking about calling it Single Bound, and our hook is going to be that we only do individual issues. So if we do the death of Superman, it's going to be, 7 episodes, right?
Mhm.
And each issue is an episode, and mostly just because I like the name Single Bound.
Yeah, no, that's a great title. I love it.
But nothing has happened with that yet. But you can email us at singleboundpod@gmail. If you have a single issue of a comic that you're like, this is a great single issue by itself, you should read it, please email me at that email, and it'll almost certainly get logged into a future episode. And you can follow us at Single Bound Podcast on Instagram if you just want to see what kind of mayhem we get up to. But that's very early days right now.
All right. Yeah, no, everyone should check that out. After that, Jmike, where can people find you and follow you?
Oh my gosh, people want to follow me? Oh my gosh. But you can also follow me at j5.bluesky.social. I'm trying to push everything over there now.
Yeah, and I do want to mention, because I don't know if I've said this to Jmike before, if you go onto the Discord, there is a man there named Joe Michael who is very active. He is a great guy from Chile, really cool to talk to. But I found out that he is not Jmike. After about 3 months of hanging out on the Discord, I had just assumed that Joe Michael was Jmike. And I said something to him about, you must have a lot of experience with that from the show. And he was like, from the show? So not all Jmikes are the same. Yeah. I'd learned a lesson that day.
No, Jmike needs to be a little bit more active on the Discord, but our Discord is great, and people, if they ping him, Jmike will respond. So check that out. As for me, again, Discord's a great place to find me, but you can find me. I'm going to push Blue Sky right now because other socials kind of feel a little gross at the moment. So on Blue Sky, you can find me at caseaiken.the whole whatever Blue Sky or bsky social or whatever it is, but at Case Aiken. If you search for Case Aiken on Blue Sky, you'll find me.
Yeah, I'm kind of trapped in that regard. I live in North Georgia, so I can't buy a hamburger without supporting somebody.
Right? Yeah.
I'm fenced out on all sides.
No, it's true, and like there is no ethical consumption under capitalism is the whole situation there.
Yeah.
But, outside of that, you can find me on, another big Omni Corporation's website on YouTube. We post episodes of Men of Steel as well as my other podcast, Another Pass, on our YouTube channel, the Certain POV Media YouTube channel, where you can find those. You can also find my Superman analog videos, and you can find the various Dungeons and Dragons videos that I've been putting out recently there. So check out our YouTube channel because it's a lot of fun. And if you're checking out this episode on our YouTube channel, thank you. We love to have you. Otherwise, you can check out other shows at certainpov.com. I'm going to give a shout out to Fun and Games with Matt and Geoff right now. It is a show that's going strong, and we love both Matt and Geoff. They both used to be our editor and are doing wonderful things talking about games journalism and just the spreading positivity in the video game space. So check out Fun and Games with Matt and Geoff, then circle back here, and until next time, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Jmike Folson and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Sophia Ricciardi. Our logo is by Chris Batista, and episode art is by Case Aiken. Our theme is by Jeff Moonen.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun, whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen,
And I am Matt, aka Stormageddon.
and on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there. So we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Geoff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.
CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.